Hi, everyone, and welcome. We are very excited to be joined by two special guests today. We have welcoming back Luke Scarmazzo, who is a cannabis advocate, justice ambassador for Glass House, author, and co-founder of Profit Brands. A lot of stuff there, and we're excited to be joined today for the first time by Manndie Tingler, manager for Luke, and CCO for Profit Brands as well. We'll hear more about what she does very, very shortly because it's more than just those two things. But appreciate you guys both taking the time to join and kind of talk through what's going on in the cannabis world.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
Awesome.
it's an honor to be here again, Mackenzie. It was always fun hanging out with you. So yeah, when you told us about another time to come hang out with Mackenzie on Advice, let's do it.
We appreciate it. It was great also seeing both of you guys at Benzinga as well. I feel like that was so fun. You guys did a great job. We can talk a little about that later, but it feels like Benzinga is miles in the past now already. I feel like time moves so fast in cannabis land.
3 weeks ago.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
It was a good conference, though.
It was a great one, I agree. Also, hey, Stevie, how are you doing? Good reminder before we jump in, because I would love to start with you, Manndie, just sort of talking through your background, how you got into cannabis. But if anybody has comments, questions, of course, you're welcome to ask on any platform. We'll get to those as we go. But Manndie, I feel like would love to just start with you. Would love to, just because it's your first time on with us, talk through your story, how you got into it, how you met Luke, how this sort of relationship.
Well, my story is at no means as exciting or filled with as many highs and lows as Luke's. But
she's more of a balanced person. I go around.
Luke keeps the pizzazz going around here. He keeps it spicy for us.
Complementary relationship. I love it. Okay, that's great.
But I've always been a cannabis plant lover. I actually grew up in a very conservative family home. So cannabis was not a part of our environment growing up. It was very taboo. It was something you did not do. I was very much so a goody two shoes in high school, cheerleader, honor roll.
Oh, wow,
never
the whole thing.
Parents mad kind of kid. And as I questions about the way that the world works, I started really asking a lot of questions about this plant. And anyway, in my early adulthood years, I decided to start cultivating to make some spare money. And over the years, have just kind of always dabbled and really felt a strong pull towards nonprofit business work. And so when cannabis in a medical use was really like a big thing, and we had approved it for adult use in California, I had a couple of really great opportunities that came my way to jump full-fledged into the medical space and to really dive in as a leader, and just really found my home here. And so ever since then, and that was back in 2013, we were cultivating way before that, like back in early 2000s. I just found that this is like where I'm supposed to be. I feel like it's the most kismet spot with all of my background in mental health and nonprofit work, and really just advocating for human rights. And then also really finding a place for this plant in other people's lives. And then here in the cannabis space, I still wear my advocate hat every single day. I've served on the National Cannabis Industry Board of Directors and helped be on the launch team for a number of California's more successful, more well-known brands. Some of them have even spanned across the globe, like Papa and Barkley. But now I'm here at sitting next to the co-founder of Profit Brands. Profit is a brand that we built together, and what I really found my forte in cannabis is launching and scaling brands. So this one is very special. Mm-hmm. It's got a goosebump giving backstory to it. Mm-hmm. And I also happen to have accidentally fallen in love with the guy who it's based. So
that's great. Oh, love to hear it. That's awesome. Well, yeah, it's wild to think, because you're right that you've been in cannabis for a while and you sort of developed as you've gone through and as sort of the industry's matured. But it's wild that both of your guys' cannabis story kind of started roughly around the same time and such different outcomes. But then also to come back and kind of be here is wild.
Luke,
I feel like.
Sorry. Yeah. I was just going to say, when Luke was arrested, I will never forget that day. I didn't know him then. I had no idea who he was. I knew it was a man who ran a dispensary that lived an hour and a half away from me.
Oh, so you guys were local too, and then, okay, wow.
Yeah, I was in Sacramento then, and the reality is I was growing weed in my attic, running a pretty successful nonprofit in a city that did not allow that, still does not allow it. Mm-hmm. And I was scared to death when I saw his picture on the news that day. We had big talks about shutting it down, what the repercussions would be. Again, it's not a conversation you ever get away from back then. But the realities became incredibly heavy. And so I followed Luke's case for years. Some years we heard nothing. Some years we heard a lot. And as the industry was transitioning, it was always something that was really important to me to advocate for people who were incarcerated, because at the end of the day, I'm a mom, I'm a business owner, and I'm taking home a paycheck while someone else is away from their family. And just never felt right to me.
Yeah, wanting to right those wrongs. I think even just as a person, I know it's obviously more emotionally hits home when you are a parent and you see that separation, and that can be incredibly hard. But it is just sort of wild to see the progress made in cannabis and the fact that there are still, some wrongs that haven't been righted yet in sort of the cannabis space. So again, very happy that both of you are working for that. Maybe it's a good time to talk a little bit more about Profit Brands. One, I think the logo is kind of obscuring your shirt, but Luke, there you go. It looks good. Can you talk us through, sort of the full circle story a little bit around Profit Brands, how you decided to kind of get back into cannabis? I feel like that could be scary after everything you went through.
This guy is scared of nothing. Okay. Like,
resilient.
I'm scared of stuff, and he's like, it's okay.
It's a good balance. It's a good balance. It's great.
No, that's not true. No. But I'll tell you about the backstory, and I'll bring you up to when I got out and met Manndie, and then she'll give you guys the updated version of where we're at. So, for the listeners that aren't aware of the backstory, I opened one of the first dispensaries in the Central Valley, or the very first dispensary in the Central Valley, one of the first in the nation, California Healthcare Collective. In 2004, we ran it successfully for 2 years. And unfortunately, in 2006, we were raided by the DEA and later sentenced with my co-defendant, Ricardo Montez. And we were later sentenced to 20 and 22 years in prison, respectively. We served time in 5 different prisons. It was wildness, craziness, all the horror stories that you hear about prison, they happen. And the club feds, kind of mythology that it perhaps used to be around maybe in the 1980s and stuff before a lot of people got in trouble, is not there anymore. It's definitely a penitentiary setting with gangs and violence and all that madness that happens. So yeah, we successfully ran the business, raided, went through trial, found guilty in trial, and then began our 15 years in prison, and or we began our 20 and 22 years in prison. 9 years in, I write a petition on behalf of Ricardo and myself to President Obama, and by the grace of God, President Obama granted Ricardo's clemency petition and called his sentence unjust and outdated. But unfortunately, they denied mine. And they don't tell you why. They say executive privileges don't require them not to disclose what it is. And I could reapply in a year, and I did reapply. Ricardo got out. It was a great thing. We celebrated it, but it was kind of bittersweet, kind of having to explain it to our family. And
sorry for that.
I got to ask really quickly. I know this is a very harrowing story. What kind of dog do you guys have? It's so cute sounding.
They're little white, want to sit in your lap all day dogs. Maltipoo and a cockapoo.
Yeah.
Very sweet. Okay, awesome. Any good names?
Winston and Greta.
Good names. All right. Okay, there you go. Very perfect.
Very English name.
Very old people name.
Proper. Yeah, that's true. That's good. I like it. I think it's a duo. Okay. So Ricardo getting out, was that hard? So again, they don't give you a reason. That has to be tough just in general because you don't have that, not closure, but just sort of answer. I know it's good to celebrate, but that must have been incredibly hard. Did you have any personal theories on why?
It was bittersweet. I think one of the prevailing theories, and again, they're all theories that nobody knows for sure. So I want to just put a disclaimer out there and say it's totally President Obama who knows and his counsel. But I think that the DOJ and there was other entities in law enforcement that didn't really like my stance and my advocacy. And I continued to be outspoken the entire time I was incarcerated. And many other cannabis prisoners, not to their discredit, did not choose to be outspoken. And I do not blame them, because everybody's individual cases have to do whatever each person feels they have to do. And for me, I just felt like to continue to advocate for the plant that I believe in and that I gave our freedom for, was something that was very important to me. So, if that caused me to serve several more years, so be it. It wasn't something that I wasn't going to compromise my morals. What they wanted, several times they had come to us and said, say that you were wrong, say you were harming the community, and doing these things, and it didn't coincide with what we really were doing. We were providing a medical necessity to a community, and we did it in accordance with state law and in accordance with a doctor's recommendation. So,
and while all that is 100% true and valid and would have just been enough as the why, my belief is that simultaneously, while Luke was on his upswing with opening this dispensary and following his entrepreneurial instincts, he was also a up and coming hip hop artist. And he had produced his first major album, done his first music videos professionally done, and was really starting to make a name for himself. And one of the songs that he produced is a song called Businessman. You can look it up on Spotify.
I've listened to it. I love it. It's great.
And there's a verse in there, or a line in there that says, "Fuck the feds." And they did use that song against him during his trial, and took that lyric very personally. Very personally. And so I think that that's a big piece of it. No one likes being insulted for what they've made their career out of, right?
I think that's true, but I also feel like in rap, it's such like a common thing, or like F the police. Like it's just sort of, not necessarily making like threats directly to it. Like it's not, but
it's normal. And also it's entertainment.
Well, the hip hop and the law enforcement, hip hop community and the law enforcement community have always kind of had antagonistic beginnings, and even in the roots of hip hop. You can go all the way back to NWA and Two Live Crew and the early, hip hop acts and rap acts, and you can see it even materializing there. So it really wasn't anything new. But it was, it's all up for speculation. That definitely could have been. I know it rubbed some people wrong, and I definitely could have been a factor in why I continued to serve the time. And to fast forward to Trump, to President Trump, when my petition came before President Trump, and Jackie Bryant covered this very well on Forbes. I got granted. I was granted under Trump. They called my family and told me, "Hey, you're gonna get out. He's coming home. Get ready. Get plane tickets." I pack all my bags in prison. I'm ready. I'm waiting. And at the last minute, the DOJ comes over with a list of names, not just mine, but a few dozen, and that they wanted pulled off the clemency list. So, that was a hard one too, because I was like so close to the door, like I could smell freedom on the other side of it. And to have to go back and talk to my family at that time and tell them, hey, it didn't come through again, was a devastating thing. It was just extremely, extremely difficult. But we kept fighting. We kept on. The community continued to advocate for me. Attorneys, before I had filed my own motion to get out pro se, and attorneys started pouring in with messages saying, "Hey, we'll come help you." Before we searched for attorneys, Ricardo and I had to write our own petitions because we searched for attorneys to help us, and nobody would help us.
Yeah.
And it went from not having any attorneys to having 3 or 4 that were ready to come on. And
was that just because cannabis kind of had changed in terms of how people were viewing it, even in that short time? Okay.
Yes, both. Yeah. 2 things. It was because cannabis had the legal landscape of cannabis had evolved so much over that course of time, but also is the exposure of the situation that happened with the Trump administration really propelled my case on a national scale as well. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of a double-edged sword, right? It hurt, it was bad, but it was also one of the catalysts that propelled my case to national attention. And I think that's part of the reason why we saw so many attorneys come through. And Edie Learman of Emerald Law Group and Carrie Dent of King and Spalding in Washington, D.C. Carrie came on at the end and saw us over the finish line with just one of the most brilliant motions I've ever read. And she just demolished the U.S. attorney on the other side. It was so impressive. And then I was out on February 3rd of 2023. And with a mind of getting back into the industry, but in the retail side of it, because I hadn't saw the industry grow. I didn't know what the progression looked like. I didn't know what the evolution of retail looked like, or the taxation, or any of those things, right? I'm just back in 2006 saying, I want my license back.
Of course, yeah.
And there, I watched a lot of these social equity programs develop. So I was thinking, Ricardo and I fit this to a T. We're great candidates for social equity. So yeah, we want our retail license back. And within the first 30 days of kind of just visiting some old friends that still ran retails and stuff, it was really apparent to me that retail was not the lane to be in the industry now. And it wasn't the same as it was back in 2006. It was new and exciting back then. We were kind of, trailblazing and pushing the envelope. And now you see it to where we have, oversaturation and overtaxation, and then just a few dispensaries that do well, and then a lot of other ones that don't do well. And that's when Manndie reached out to me on Instagram or Messenger, one of those.
It's so social media platform.
Yeah,
I was like, welcome home.
Yeah. And she talked to me about an award show that she was putting together with an amazing group of women called the Women's Canna Awards. And she asked me if I would present the Social Justice Award with my daughter, Jasmine. And I mean, I was so honored to be able to be asked first and foremost, and to be able to do it with my daughter, who is also an up and coming young entrepreneur in the industry, was such a cool opportunity that I jumped all over it. I drove up to Sacramento, I think, a week later, and we met and talked about it. And I'll let you go from there.
Yeah. And, at that time, when we first got together, Luke was asking all these questions, and I was actually really excited. There's
Winston. Yeah.
We should just bring him on the show.
You're welcome to show a dog. I love it. Anyhow, it's all good. But
I was so impressed with how much he had put energy into staying abreast of what was happening in the industry. And really, he just needed me to kind of like fill in a couple of blanks and like explain why some certain things had turned out the way that they have, or like where they are at in the policy change process. But he really knew. And then we started talking about his reentry and what he was envisioning that looking like. And he shared with me that his, original thought about the dispensary and how they were kind of moving away from that. And then they were kind of talking about launching a brand. And because I launch and scale brands in California, and California is losing brands, just dropping like flies. At first I was like,
she said, actually her exact direct quote was, "Do not do that. Brands are dying on the vine in California."
And then I paused for a second and I was like, but wait a minute. Your story is unlike any brand out there. And I know how to launch and scale brands in the toughest of situations. And so I said, I know this sounds really weird. And imagine saying this to someone the first time you're face to face with them. I said, I know this is probably weird, but I really feel like God put me in your path to help you.
Oh, that's great. It seems like it's working so far. I mean, yes, it seems like that has held out to be true.
And then originally they were thinking about a name of a brand called Sugar High, and had like a couple of different components to it that were more along the lines of like an edibles brand or something like that.
Gummies and candies and stuff like that.
But he's a flower guy. He was a cultivator for years. His partner is a cultivator. They love this flower. And so I couldn't even imagine just pigeonholing themselves to that. And so anyway, for a couple of weeks, we're kicking around the Sugar High thing. We're trying to mock up some logos, but I'm not feeling it at all. And I'm like, how do I tell him that I think this is a mistake? We're like new and we had just started realizing that we had big feelings for each other too. So I was like, how do I tell him professionally that this is a mistake, but not crush him personally.
Emotionally, it's hard. It's a balance. Yeah.
And so one day we just happened to be driving down the freeway, and he turns to me and he goes, I want your opinion on the branding. And I'm like, oh God, here's the moment. And I was like, I don't think it's right for you. I really don't feel like it's right for you. It doesn't scream to me what your persona resonates. And for me, even in my day-to-day life, there's something that we learn from each other every day. He teaches me something every day. There's something about the way he moves in this world and the wisdom that he has for everything that he's been through that's a bit prophetic.
So it doesn't have sort of the heaviness and the weight of your story, kind of where you're going with it, sort of sugar, a little bit light.
Yeah.
Do you think it's easier to have, because if you guys have that very close, intimate relationship, is it easier, has it gotten easier to kind of give that frank feedback when you guys need it? Because if you guys are balancing each other, okay.
Band-Aids are off, man. Like, sometimes shit gets brutal around here.
That's good, but it's for the idea and for making something better and helping people and everything else.
Well, we're both like really passionate and creative people. Yeah. And so sometimes our visions don't align. But what I will say is that we always end up coming together collectively. And we've produced this beautiful brand. It's our baby. And every single SKU is one of our little children.
And we trust each other's like passions and visions, right? Yeah. Even sometimes, you know, when we're creators and leaders in spaces, a lot of times not everybody will see your vision. Yeah. So you have to have people around you that can just trust it and trust what you say and kind of you know, support what you're doing. And that's really been both of us in this situation, especially with my co-defendant, best friend, and co-founder, Ricardo Montez, and our expert in manufacturing, Salman Razani. The synergy that we have amongst the team and the trust that we have amongst the team of just, hey, you know, I trust you to know what you're going to do in that certain situation, even if I don't see it. And I think that's a really awesome aspect of our team. And just the ethos of our company is just it's very social justice, rooted in social justice, but we also want to get the plant and its benefits to as many people as possible. Yep. So in order to do that, we can't have high profit margins and we can't have low volume. Like, so our whole ethos is to get high quality products to consumers in price points that they usually would never see.
Yeah.
And if we're not trying to make $1 million doing it. What this play is not to have a one-time sale with a customer. We're trying to build, profit is trying to make lifelong customers and share that experience with them continuously throughout their life as we both evolve as a brand, as people, and as with the plant.
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like also, especially, I know we're not early days. Cannabis has had a long kind of run and a long sort of stages of development. But I do think kind of, especially in California, having not lower prices, but being able to give really, really high quality at a price that people can kind of accept. I know there's illicit market still kind of in play there, does kind of bring them to the brand. And, you know, once they find it, can kind of build that lifelong relationship, like you're saying, which is important.
Yeah, it's our intention to produce a product line that's just attainable for everybody. You know, we know what top shelf product looks like, whether it's in a vape, whether it's in a flower, a pre-roll. And so we have hand procured every single nugget of our menu and have really specific SOPs on how we procure products for the brand. But it's really important to us that, you know, Luke's family, they all come from very blue collar, like means, but they all love cannabis and they spend top dollar buying the best stuff. So we want to make sure that top stuff is more attainable.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And again, I think you can't replace that that passion for the plant that you guys have, the team that's all behind it. I think that all just kind of lends itself to the passion of the brand that you guys are building, which is great. I would love to talk a little bit, just because it's recent news with the rescheduling component.
Sure.
How does that change things for you? What do you guys even think of it? I guess Luke more specifically, just because that's got to be wild to see that change kind of come through after the whole journey.
So much has happened just since you've gotten out.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's historic. Let's say, let me come right out and say, this is the Schedule 3, the signal from the DEA that they would recommend to the White House to move to from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3 is historic. And it's good news. Now, let me preface that
Of course.
is it's not enough. Going down to a Schedule 3 does have benefits for 280E and a huge boon for our industry. That's without a doubt. And it does create a medical necessity defense in federal court for people that have cannabis cases. That's also great. And it lowers mandatory minimums for people who go through the federal court system. Another good thing. There shouldn't be mandatory minimums for people anyway. Somebody should not go into a federal court in 2024 and receive a mandatory minimum 10-year sentence. That is ridiculous. So I get it. Like, we have some of our people in our community that are not celebrating this at all. And they're saying, like, that's not what we want. But with our position, and my position personally, especially, is that incremental progress is better than no progress. Slow motion is better than no motion, right? Sure. So we take what we can get. We continue to push for what we want. We want descheduling. We want cannabis off the controlled substance list. We want federal legalization. We want interstate commerce. These things are close. We have to continue to push this. Instead of looking at this as not enough, let's look at this as a catalyst to do more. Because I think we have fresh wind in the sails with this announcement. And I think we can continue to use that momentum to not only get cannabis to where we want it to be, but also bring more people into the cannabis community. And that's what we want, right? The goal of our brand and just the ethos of us as people, I guess, are to have as many people experience the benefits of this plant as possible. So that helps it, right? So you can't be mad at Schedule 3 just because it didn't get all the way across the finish line. It's almost there. It's better to go from the 50-yard line into the red zone than to just stand at the 50-yard line and complain.
Yes, that is true. And I think exactly what you're saying, that this is a step. It's not like we're ending it here. I think there is more progress to be made, is an important thing to remember. I feel like only a few people are kind of on the edges saying, this is done, this is all we want to see, or this is not enough. And like you're saying, we reject it because it isn't exactly what we want.
I do want to dispel a certain rumor that has been circulating out here with us. And that's when Schedule 3 happens, somehow their state cannabis business or their dispensary will become illegal. And that's just not true, because the federal government views your state business and your state dispensary as illegal already. It just slides from a Schedule 1 to a Schedule 3. The penalties lighten slightly, but it doesn't change anything. Cannabis is not legalized. So I don't want to get that conception that, hey, we've legalized cannabis, it's the end game, hurrah, let's celebrate.
Yeah,
there's
nowhere
people,
near the end.
There's people in prison right now, probably listening to your show, maybe not within the rules, but sitting there listening to this show that are serving time for a cannabis offense.
Yep. And
that is crazy. So Schedule 3 does not change that. Schedule 3 does not change Parker Coleman's 60-year sentence. It doesn't change Valerie Flores' 10-year sentence. They still have to continue to serve that. And the only thing that changes that is when we change it through legislation. These fixes right here are policy fixes. Even the Cole memo and the appropriations amendments, these are all kind of duct tape to kind of hold the whole puzzle together. And we need real legislation. And unfortunately, the legislation that I'm seeing come out with the MORE Act and the CAOA are not enough. Like, we have to push those further. The CAOA has segments in it that basically say certain cannabis cases would still stay in prison. That's not right. And then other parts would have to go, like, you would have to go before a judge, and the judge would have to okay your release. That's leaving too much discretion to the system that already continued to fail us.
Yes.
The other thing too is that, Schedules 3 just changes the ranking of this particular plant, and now can just make it more researchable. The FDA can start doing what they need to do. But you guys Google real quick how long it takes to get FDA approval. There's so much movement happening around our industry politically that to be distracted by this FDA thing is a mistake. Right. It really doesn't change anything today. Right. It changes nothing today. And also, for those of you who are out there in the world fear-mongering or wondering about whether you should or shouldn't invest in cannabis because the feds are going to take your cannabis business away the second that they legalize, no. Your state took a stand against the federal government already and has allowed billions of dollars to flood into their market and tax revenue in the billions to generate, and they have allocated those funds towards hundreds of programs at this point, law enforcement, kids programs, yada, 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 whatever you want to donate it to. They are not going to just wipe that away all of a sudden because the feds want to change their mind. Yeah. That's not going to happen. Yeah, no one in this industry is going to let that
happen. We would be remiss if we didn't say Schedule 3 also brought in a lot of investment. Absolutely. A lot of people feel more comfortable now with it.
Look at the stock market for cannabis. I mean, it is skyrocketed in the last 3 days. I mean, it's up like almost 50% or something like that.
I don't know what
I think it definitely had huge jumps. I think it gave a little back the day after, which kind of makes sense. Again, smaller names in general, which I think, but I think you're right overall with the picture that this does make people more comfortable. It does make investors more comfortable. It's on the path as we continue to see more and more change to make larger institutions interested. Because I think there has been interest in cannabis on the investment side for a long time, but I think people have been a little nervous around. We think this is all going to happen. There are so many states that are now having their own programs for recreational or medical. Something has to change at a certain point. Something has to change. So I think seeing that for the first time and really in a real way kind of drove that movement for sure.
The most impactful thing that we're going to see right away will just be a 280E change. That itself will provide a bit of breathing room for brands. Mm-hmm. But really, there's not anything else immediate that I can think of that changes our lives any.
The 280E is big, though, right?
Yeah, the 280E is huge. The criminal justice aspect of it is a big deal, and the influx of capital and the social acceptance. Those are a lot of things. We don't hear administrations signal, and again, it's just talk. It's just talk. Let me say that. Mm-hmm. But we don't usually hear this from administration. We don't hear cannabis friendly talk and rescheduling talk and legalization talk and pardon talk. Like that has to be acknowledged. We have to acknowledge that they are making steps. Now, we need to see results. Mm-hmm. The talking part is good and getting awareness and using the bully pulpit, but now it's time to follow through with our promise, release all people who are incarcerated for cannabis and expunge their records, and follow through with federal legalization and interstate commerce.
Yep. I think the main thing seems to be kind of holding politicians a lot of the time to account, because I know Biden has talked a lot, again, about the pardons, but it's only really affected a small group. It hasn't really done the full work of getting people out of prison and jail.
Well, zero.
Well, and it's been for zero cannabis.
So no one was let out of prison by those pardons.
It's been all meth. Yeah. Every single case has been meth.
And the small group of pardons that he just did there was no cannabis offenders on that list. So, we need more out of this administration, especially in this year. If they really want the constituents to come out in support of the Democratic Party on the ticket this year, they have to do something when it comes to cannabis legislation.
This has got to be one of the biggest election issues, because think about it. Over 60% of the U.S. has agreed that at least medical access is proper. And that right there, even if you are not a supporter of Biden, I'm not a huge fan of either option right now, but I can get behind this. This is a big step. It's something long overdue. Biden had a heavy hand in creating the environment that all of us are living in currently. And this, in my opinion, would landslide the election.
That's why he's uniquely positioned to be able to fix it.
Yep.
Because you were at the helm of a lot of these laws. Even my mandatory minimum was created with the 1988 Anti-Drug Abuse Act. And it was chief sponsor was Joe Biden. So, he's uniquely positioned to be able to fix a lot of the problems that created this issue and mass incarceration in general.
And Kamala.
I was going to say, both,
In California, she was very heavy-handed in prosecuting people and putting people in prison for this plan. Now she's like completely taken that hat off in a completely different stance. It's almost like, like parrot stood behind her and finally got her to say the right thing. But
I wouldn't say that. It's good to have them finally have the epiphany and come over, because that's what we do. We advocate kind of to make sure that they come to our side and change their mind. So when they do, I want to be careful that we don't disparage them. But it was a drastic switch by Kamala, in which she overnight, over her stance of when she was in a DA in Alameda County. And we've been reached out by like different news agencies to ask, hey, find people who had cases prosecuted by her so they could make her look bad in news. And we're not in that. That's not our thing. People are allowed to not be defined by their past. And who would I be to hold somebody accountable by past mistakes or past misinformation that they feel like they've had the epiphany and they're coming over to the side of fact and logic.
I will say that is an incredibly compassionate take and view. I think a lot of people don't feel that way and do kind of want to say, you made some mistakes, so I get that. But I do agree. You want to look moving forward, because that's what makes real progress, not just sort of being negative necessarily. And
also, it's important, right? This is also equally important to consider when we're talking about law enforcement. People want to give police officers just hell when they finally start becoming more of an advocate or in favor of the cannabis space. They're like, oh, well, you incarcerated people, you arrested people, you did this, you did that. But like, people are also operating within the scope of their job. Okay, I was once a social worker and had to make really hard decisions that were not in line with my value system. Okay. And also, when someone is finally ready to make that change, to step forward into their truth and stand on it, we have to support them. We can't just like condemn them for everything in the past.
Right.
Yep, I definitely agree. It's time to take that step, and hopefully we see more politicians kind of, step up and make that progress, because it's way, 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 way overdue. For sure. But it's good that, again, we're starting to see that kind of coming up, which is great. All right. Well, then I wanted to close a little bit talking about, Luke, your book really quickly. I think it's super interesting. If anyone wants to really learn more in detail, your story, everything like that, can you talk a little bit about what it took to make the book? Oh, you have in the background. Can you bring it up a little closer to the camera so everyone can see? There you go.
Available on Amazon.
That's her copy. You're not going to get the silver signature usually if you order it on Amazon, but if you send it to us, I'll do that for you.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Yeah, it's available on Amazon. It's called High Price: The Luke Scarmazzo Story. I wrote the entire book in solitary confinement, or what they call the SHU in federal prison. It's an acronym that stands for Secure Housing Unit, and it is what it sounds like. So I didn't have much to do in there, and I ended up having to trade food and get 2 lunch trays and dinner trays for writing paper and ink to be able to write the book. There's a whole story behind that, and it is the story of the establishment of this industry and our role within it, and the craziness of the 215 era of dispensaries and blazing that kind of path and growing and all the just wildness that went into opening one of the very first dispensaries in the nation. And then the criminal justice aspect of going through the system and being raided and arrested and experiencing prison for the first time, and what my family went through, and finally getting out. So yeah, obviously this spoiler alert, the story has a happy ending. I end up getting out, so that's a good part.
Yes.
Please check it out. It's a story that we put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into, and food.
Yeah, very true. A story 1,000% worth reading. I definitely recommend. I know a lot of people are probably coming to the cannabis space through kind of an investment lens, but I think it's important to, like Luke, look at the history behind it, look at what it took to get here. I think that's a great way to kind of capture that.
Right in that lane, there's a quote from Steve Jobs that actually says, you can't really understand what's going on now unless you understand what came before.
Exactly.
And that's how I opened the book, because of where we're at today, when a lot of newcomers into this industry, to understand the history of it is to make sure that we don't repeat it, right? So we can learn from the giants that came before us. We stood on their shoulders. and my shoulders are open for anyone else to stand on.
That's fantastic. All right. Well, perfect way to close. Again, Luke, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Manndie, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah.
How can people kind of stay in touch with both of you and Profit Brands as well, just to kind of learn more about it a little bit?
The super easy way is Luke and I manage firsthand the Profit Brands social media account. So if you just hit Profit Brands on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, I think we even have a TikTok account.
Oh,
Maybe
there you go.
as much.
Hip.
But any of those platforms, you're going to be receiving one of us. So just hit us there.
Yep.
And
we're at the Premier Group in California. If you want
Yeah.
to check out Profit Brands product, Pheno's, we're going to be at Pheno's, PCF, the cookie store in LA,
Yep.
Antioch Lemonade. So yeah, come check us out.
Sanctuary in Sacramento.
It's come over and check us out. Say what's up. Tap
That's
in.
fantastic. Yeah, love it. Leave a comment, say hi. Yeah, all that stuff is important.
Guys on Amazon.
Also recommend. All right, fantastic. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. And we'll catch you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Before investing, carefully consider the investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses found in the prospectus, available at advisorshares.com.